Okay, hello and welcome everyone to the Kidney Project's May live question and answer session. I'm Liz Gress. I'm our Director of Communications, Partnerships, and Regulatory Affairs at the Kidney Project. And we're really excited to be with you today to answer your questions and talk about how patients and families can get involved in the Kidney Project. Joining us today as the host is Jennifer Lauerman, who is a marketing professional who has been volunteering with the Kidney Project for the past few months. Jennifer is also the mother of a teenage daughter with FSGS who recently received a kidney transplant. So they have firsthand knowledge of the kidney patient and family experience. Jennifer will be interviewing Dr. Shuvo Roy, our technical director, about the latest status of the project and ways that you can participate. Then we will go to questions that the registrants submitted, and finally to questions from the live chat. So that's what we have planned. Thank you all again for joining us, and I will hand things over to Jennifer to get us started.
Hello. Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be part of this Q&A session today. So my name's Jennifer, and I just wanted to tell you guys a little bit about myself. So I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I am a marketing consultant. I have marketed, almost 25 years of marketing experience. I helped put on the Super Bowl when it was here in the Twin Cities. I used to run the marketing for Mall of America. And I have a number of other positions that I've held. Now I'm doing consulting, which allows me to help organizations that I get really passionate about. And one of those things is the artificial kidney. Like probably many of you guys, I have a very personal reason why I'm so passionate about that, about the artificial kidney. And I feel very, very strongly about the need. And that's because I have a 14-year-old daughter. Her name is Pepper. She received a kidney transplant when she was 11. Actually, she turned 12 when she was in the hospital. So just over 2 years ago. And you know, transplant's a miracle. We all know that. But it's also, we have a lot of issues that have come with it for her particularly. One of the challenges she had was when she post-transplant had to, and I'm sure there's many of you out there that have had this experience. It's overwhelming when you come home from the hospital and you're on 22 medications. She, in her little, at that time, 12-year-old body, those medications were very hard on her. And so for probably a year, maybe a year and a half post-transplant, she dealt with crippling nausea. And we went round and round, tried to change meds, did all of these things. It was very difficult for her, caused her not to be able to go to school, you know, it just caused a lot of issues for her. So one of the things I get really excited about in regards to the artificial kidney is that the anti-rejection medicine would not be required. And because it's been, I know not everybody has this issue, but it's been so hard on her body. That's something that is really exciting for me. But also, you know, she had this transplant when she was 11 years old. The average kidney transplant lasts 10 to 12 years. We're hoping her first transplant will last longer. I was actually her donor, and it's a perfect match. So she's doing amazingly well now. But, you know, even with that fact, we know she's looking at, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 transplants in her lifetime. We don't have a huge family. And I worry a lot about where is that next transplant going to come from? Is she going to still be a child, or is she going to be an adult? And if she's an adult, that makes it even harder because, you know, as many of you probably know, you know, you end up on the list, and that list is long. And so that's why, knowing all of this information, I wanted to get involved with the Kidney Project, because number one, it would be amazing for my daughter specifically, but it would also be amazing for the 100,000 plus people that are currently waiting for a kidney. And it just doesn't have to be that way. So a friend of mine made an introduction to the team over there, and I've been helping with marketing, and it's been really, really fun. And so I'm loving helping out, and I'm excited to talk more today about this project and how, you know, other people can get involved, because there certainly is a need. A lot of people ask, I notice on social media, when is this happening? What's the delay? What's going on? And so I think if we can get more people involved who have amazing skills to bring to the table, I think this can all happen maybe a little bit faster and we can speed up the process. So in the meantime, let's talk today a little bit more about where we are today and what the current status is. So for that, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Roy. He's going to talk a little bit more about what's the current status, where are we today, and what's the new projected timeline. So Dr. Roy, you want to give an update?
Sure, Jennifer, what a pleasure it is to have you here today. And thank you for all your support and sharing your story about Pepper. I'm so glad to hear that she's doing well, and clearly, at least for the short term, that's a load off your mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. So listen, I know we've been doing this for a few months now, and we have some new people. So what I'll do is I'll start off with a video that some of you have seen, no doubt, but for some of you may not. So I'll go ahead and put it on the screen. And what we'll do is we'll actually give you a capsule of what the whole project's about, and then we'll talk about more the technical updates on the other side. So here we go. I think we'll play now. Here we go.
People living with kidney failure can soon look forward to a future without dialysis or an endless wait for a transplant organ. Combining continuous treatment with total mobility, the implantable bioartificial kidney will give patients back their health, freedom, and quality of life. The compact device will replicate many functions of healthy kidneys and will not require immunosuppression drugs. The bioartificial kidney combines a mechanical hemofilter to remove toxins from blood and a bioreactor containing engineered renal tubule cells to maintain water volume, electrolyte balance, and metabolic functions. Highly efficient membranes constructed from semiconductor silicon wafers enable filtration without requiring pumps or electrical power, while protecting the renal cells from rejection by the patient's immune system. The biocompatible device attaches to the circulatory system and removes toxins to the bladder as waste. After a decade of engineering development to refine the hemofilter and bioreactor components, preclinical prototypes of the implantable bioartificial kidney have been successfully created. Cleanroom microfabrication processes have been established to reliably produce high-quality silicon membranes. Tissue culture protocols have also been optimized to reproducibly grow renal tubule cells and maintain their function. The silicon membranes were mounted in polycarbonate housing to construct hemofilters, and in similar fashion, bioreactors were assembled to immunoprotect the renal tubule cells. The hemofilter and bioreactor components were then connected to create bioartificial kidney prototypes for benchtop and preclinical testing. In proof-of-concept experiments, the hemofilter operated under blood pressure alone, without systemic anticoagulation, while the renal cells in the bioreactor remained alive and healthy without immunosuppression. Further improvements will scale up the prototypes with additional silicon membranes and renal cells, creating clinical devices that can demonstrate sustained treatment of kidney failure in human trials. The implantable bioartificial kidney will provide the therapy and mobility patients need to move beyond the burdens of dialysis and organ shortage, and once again enjoy the freedoms of everyday life.
So you can see the video that I shared, which some of you have seen before, captures the project at multiple levels. It talks about the vision, it talks about the technology, and it talks about the status today. And in short, what we did over the last year and a half during the pandemic is to take the knowledge we had gained over the last decade and a half, integrate it into a functional prototype. What does that mean? Basically, we wanted to show the combination of a mechanical filter unit, combined with the cell therapy unit can be put together and work just as the kidney should. We put this into a pig, and then we're able to show that the device operated to create urine. And that is the culmination of a vision that we could actually do this. And the science and the physics and the chemistry and the biology said it should be possible, but it was really satisfying to show that we could achieve the production of urine through this tandem combination of filtration and cell therapy. What does that mean? That is the same architecture that our native healthy kidneys demonstrate. In our kidneys, we've got the first part of the kidney called the glomerulus, which acts as a filter. It takes blood, generates filtrate. And then that filtrate is processed by the tubule component of the kidney and gets concentrated into urine. And that's exactly what we do with our two-stage system. The silicon filters filter blood, and then the cell therapy unit or the bioreactor processes that ultrafiltrate, concentrates it to generate urine. And we are mimicking the native kidney's function. Now, I should caution all the viewers that we showed this as a functional prototype. Why do I say that? We do not have enough membrane filtration capacity or cells inside the device to provide sufficient therapeutic benefit. So we tested this in a healthy animal to show that we could generate urine. But that device you saw in the video by itself would not provide enough treatment capacity to an animal with compromised kidney function. But it's exciting because we know the technology works, and we have to look forward. What are we going to do? We'll have to scale up the technology and optimize it with more membrane area and more cells so that we can provide therapeutic capacity. And then we have to go through all the rigorous studies that will be needed before we get to humans. Let me stop there for a second. Can go into technical aspects of this with Jennifer if she wants, and if there are questions from the audience, but let's focus on whatever is of interest to the audience.
Yeah, so I just, and I'm sort of your layman here because I'm not a scientist. So I'm going to help kind of for the listeners, and maybe some of them are scientists, but for those that aren't, my understanding is one of the things that's really exciting about this is it's the first artificial kidney that's been in development that would be completely housed inside the human body. That's correct, right?
Right. So when we embarked on this concept years ago, the thinking was, what is important for patients and what's important from not only from their lifestyle, but also from a health perspective. Mm-hmm. So from a lifestyle perspective, you do not want to be connected to a machine and be tethered to it and get compromised or encumbered with your activities of daily living. So we said it has to be something that can move with the patient. And so it had to be something that was ambulatory. Okay, so when I say ambulatory, it could be inside or outside. But when you think about things that are connected on the outside of portable, that's great, but you still have to have a through the skin connection. We know from a lot of other medical devices, whether it's from the origins of the pacemaker development, artificial hearts, catheters, and whatnot, anytime you have through the skin connection, you actually have an increased likelihood of infection, because the bugs, the pathogens, the germs can go through the skin into the device or through the device into the body. So we decided that we should make every effort we can to make the device completely implantable. So that's, I think. Second, by making it completely implantable, you're also able to let the patient take trips, not have to be worried about, are they going to get treatments at a machine center somewhere. So I think we heard from patients that lifestyle was so important. The ability, especially for people with family and friends, to go take a weekend trip or go away for a week was so important. So it's a tall order to say, let's start off with an implantable. And I think the goal is desirable. So we've made every effort to think about how do we make the device implantable. So that requires we make our device compact. And that's why the silicon nanotechnology is so important, because it allows you to miniaturize the membranes so it can be compact, and that allows it to be a small enough size for implantation.
Nice. I think that's so important for patients, especially those that have been on dialysis for years. While this would be a step up for dialysis, without, with it being outside of the body, having it fully implantable will be just a complete game changer. So that's one of the reasons that I think this is so exciting. So talk to us a little bit about what needs to happen before we can get to the trials. Like, what happens next? Where are we in the process?
Yeah. So I can lay out the technical roadmap a little bit. Before I do that, I should probably, as you mentioned, immunosuppression, and I thought I should just address that. This membrane technology we have developed also protects the cells inside the device from the patient's immune system. Likewise, the patient's immune system is protected from the cells that are encapsulated in the device. And this is by design of the membranes. We make the membranes with the right precision patterns of the pores, the holes, such that it lets the small toxins and nutrients go through, but doesn't let the large components such as antibodies, cytokines, necessarily pass easily through, which avoids the need for immunosuppression. So why do I bring that? I think we've seen that in this short-term experiment with the pig, we actually put, cells without immunosuppression, and the cells survived. So it's clearly possible to do that. So the reason I bring this up is because this is a good way to show how we have to move forward. So yes, we've shown proof of membranes that can provide immunoprotection, meaning no need for immunosuppression drugs. We can show membranes that just operate off the blood pressure alone, meaning you do not need batteries. And it's compact enough, it can be surgically attached in the abdominal region of a pig. And the size of the device is going to be probably the size of what a human would eventually need. The size of a pig kidney and a human kidney are not that altogether different. Mm-hmm. So by working with pig anatomy, we'll get a good sense for what it will be required for human anatomy. So what is required technically is we need to think in terms of putting more membrane surface area to provide enough filtration capacity. So let's talk some numbers here. So our native healthy kidneys provide filtration about 100 milliliters per minute. For those of you who sort of follow these things, that's the GFR. Mm-hmm. You don't get on dialysis until you're close to 10 or so, 10 to 15, some people even less, 6, 5. But between the time you start dialysis and when you're healthy, you go through this disease, progression of kidney disease as you lose GFR. So you have to be able to live your normal life until you get to dialysis. And that's when you have to get tied to a machine. So we know that to be able to provide enough capacity so that you do not have to be hooked up to a machine, you need to give a capacity beyond dialysis. Mm-hmm. What's that number? That number doesn't have to be 100% of a healthy kidney. It doesn't have to be 100 milliliters per minute. Okay, it could be anything beyond dialysis. So we've set a target that we'll start off with a modest goal of 25 to 30 milliliters per minute. If we're able to do that, we can pack sufficient membrane area with the current membrane technology that will allow us to generate enough ultrafiltrate and remove toxins from the patient continuously under blood pressure. But you also if you're removing filtrate, you also need to be able to think in terms of, will you get dehydrated? In our bodies, the tubule reabsorbs much of the water that's in the filtrate so that you're not dehydrated. You have what you call volume balance or electrolyte balance. The cells perform that. So the cell component of our device also has to perform the electrolyte balance. So again, we know it is capable of doing that based on that experiment we did, but we need to do it in a way so we can generate enough ultrafiltrate, the 20 to 30 milliliters per minute, and reabsorb enough to provide volume balance. So at a very high level, those are the two goals: more filtration, more selective reabsorption. Well, how do you get more filtration? You have to have more membrane surface area. How do you do that? You have to scale up the production of membranes. Now, we make these membranes in semiconductor clean rooms in the university lab. University labs are great for prototyping, great for concepts. But if you want to increase the amount of membrane surface area, we need to have about 10 to 50 times the membrane surface area that we have now. We need to use state-of-the-art tools that are only available at commercial foundries, at corporate foundries that deal with, say, semiconductor manufacturing. We need to be able to access them. So we need to be able to find commercial foundries that not only can make that, but will be willing to take us on as a small entity and say, yes, we'll build this membrane for you so that you can have sufficient number of membranes to put into your device. So that's one key task, is scaling up the membrane production. The second key task is the kidney cells. So some of you in the audience who've been following our work, we've been using kidney cells from cadaver kidneys that can't be transplanted. Okay, we take the kidney cells from those cadaver kidneys, isolate the good ones, if you will, store them and grow them and put them into our device. Now, what are the challenges of that? Well, we all know kidney transplants are scarce. So getting cadaver kidney transplants is not necessarily easy either. And you get a cadaver kidney if it can be used for transplant, means that it's probably not the best quality in function. So yes, we can show proof of concept, but there's a lot of variation from cadaver kidney to cadaver kidney. So we'd want to work with a group that can standardize the scale up of cell production, whether it's the cells that take from us and then grow them consistently, or work with teams that work with stem cell technologies to make sure the cells are all standardized and can perform at a certain level. And we should then say that we'll then be able to put this into our device. So what we need to find a partner that has the expertise in cell manufacturing. Think about it. We're not talking about cell isolation from a cadaver in a hospital. This is actually cell production. We're talking about biotech type companies.
Yeah, right.
Okay. So question is, how long will this take? Okay. So we've been talking to different vendors, and people can just give us rough estimates in terms of the work that's to be done. Again, I'm going to put the resource question aside for a second, but let's say if we had all the resources we had, we had the work to scale up, the work to put it together into an integrated unit, do the FDA testing that we have to and should do, because we're going to maintain patient safety, is probably the range of 3 to 4 years.
Okay. And that's if you have all the dollars that you need, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
And obviously we don't have all the dollars we need. We've never had all the dollars we need.
Right.
And I'll throw out an interesting tidbit, Jennifer, and some of the people have heard me say this. So years ago, when we started really ramping up on this effort, I was requested by one of the project sponsors from the National Institutes of Health to say, hey, give us a roadmap of how long this would take and to get done. So this was in 2010. I wrote out a roadmap with my colleague, William Fizel at Vanderbilt University now. We wrote out that, if we got the technology moving forward, within 10 years from 2010, we'd have completed the first human studies. Okay. Obviously, we have not. And a lot of that is because the funding has not come through. But interestingly, when I look at the roadmap, we've been following the roadmap more or less pretty much as we had written it. And we've taken advantage of new technology advancements that have come about in the field. But the reason we have not achieved is because we've never had the funding to continue. So the milestone we met 2 years, a year ago, and a year and a half ago, where you showed the urine being produced, was supposed to have been achieved if we had had the funding in 2014.
Okay.
So to give you a sense, it's really funding and resource limited than it is, technology limited at this stage.
Mhm. Okay. And I want to talk about the funding a little bit, but first I want to have a follow-up question in regards to what you were talking about earlier. So when you were talking about the membranes and you were saying 20, you were going to be modest. And so 25 to 30, and that was, you were talking about something per minute, right?
That's right.
Yes. So when we talk about kidney function, I mean, most people who are going into kidney failure or in kidney failure, they sort of know that magic number. They know what their function is at when they're sort of on the verge of having to go on dialysis. So, talking about being modest and, implanting those first, early artificial kidneys. What type of kidney function, just for comparison, would people expect to be at?
Yeah, sure. So I think the question for those is like, if we were to use this first round of technology development, usually we go on dialysis. Again, I'm going to generalize, when you're at about 5 to 10% of kidney function. Again, there's variations, but let's just say 10%. With the technology as we have it now, we can deliver 30% of kidney function.
Gotcha.
And I think most people on the audience will agree 30% of kidney function will keep you off dialysis, will let you do the activities of daily living with medication and lifestyle management. And then as the technology improves on both the semiconductor side and the cell manufacturing side, we will be able to increase the filtration capacity and the cell capacity, so it will mimic more of the full healthy kidney function. But I think taking this staged approach, it's sort of how we think about, say, your iPhones, you think of your computers, operating systems, you do a version 1, version 2, but you're able to get something out into the hands of the people that need it.
Yes, and you get off dialysis, which I think for many, that's the ultimate goal. So you sort of touched on funding, and I think, I've been on the other side of these things many, many times, and you don't necessarily want to hear organizations again and again and again saying we need money. But I think it's important to talk about sort of how much is needed, and then we can talk about how people can get involved a little bit. And it's I want to just throw this out there for anyone listening. I mean, we know not everybody has disposable dollars that they can put into this. But maybe somebody, or maybe your company does a match, or you just never know sort of where there might be little nuggets. But also, I think for those of you, let's just say you're out there, you're interested in this, but you're on dialysis and you don't have funds. Maybe there's other ways that you can get involved. But so we're not. So I just wanted to clarify. This is not a call, necessarily saying, help us on the financial side of things. But I think when we're talking about the timeline and the process, it's important to understand kind of what we need in order to move this thing forward. So let's talk a little bit about the funding and how much needs to be raised in the next, year to 2 years in order to get us to the human trials.
Absolutely. Happy to share that. So I'll go back to the plan. We have to scale up, do rigorous. First of all, scale up and then show that it actually provides a therapeutic benefit in a pig or pigs. So this will be what I'll call the proof of concept for therapy. Once we have that, then we need to think about the next steps. So how do we go to humans, the first patients? And for that, we need to go get approval from the Institutional Review Board, the ethics board at the universities or the hospitals. We need to get the FDA sign off for safety. And then we can get to the first in human. And I said, if everything goes well, we'll come to the money in a second. That's a 4-year safe time frame within 4 years.
Okay.
Now, how much is needed? The number we have budgeted out for membrane fabrication, scale up, testing, even getting through the first human testing is another $10 million or so. Now, can it be a little less? Possibly. Can be a little more. Possibly could be a lot more. Who knows? But I think it's important to understand one of the challenges, except for the total number. So sometimes we'll get money in dribs and drabs. So yes, we've been able to raise over the last decade. When you put the plan out, I said it's going to be a $20 million plan. We've raised about 13 million again, but they've not come in at once, or they're not even promised. They come in dribs and drabs. Sometimes they'll come in, we're moving forward, they won't come in for a long time, and then we're slowed down. So what that means that sometimes we have to take 2 steps back to get moving again. So when you don't have that assurance of money coming in, we then have to throttle down the work. We have to, obviously, people get prioritized to other things, they may move on, etc. So I think, we're talking about, say, roughly $10 million over 4 years. And with that assurance of having that level, we can maintain the pace of progress. Now, if we don't get that amount, we are committed to the project. We want to keep going. But it slows it down. So the timeline could stretch further. Now, some people have asked me, well, somebody can give you $100 million. Would that make it into a year? The short answer is no. I mean, I don't want to put out that if by some big fortune, we get $100 million, can be this done in a year. I just want to be realistic that that's probably not going to happen, because we have to do the work, and we still have to do all the safety work that is needed. But we may be able to speed it up, but I think the 4-year is realistic based on what we know from our experience. And we've been working at this on and off for the last 2 decades. But in the last decade, we've really focused our team around this, and have been fortunate that we've been able to get funding from the government. But we're at the point where the funding from the government, which is often designed for basic research, basic discovery research, doesn't fit with what we want to do, which is scale up and testing. Often that's done by industry, but because of the very unique nature of what we do, but also the challenges of kidney technology, and many of you have heard how much of a gap there is in kidney research, the industry doesn't necessarily step up until we get further downstream or de-risk the technology, which means get to the first in human. So the goal is, let's get the work done to get to first in human. And then I'm very confident that, the commercial sector will step in. And if not the commercial sector, the policymakers will step in and make sure the commercial sector moves it forward.
Exactly. I agree with you. And so this next 10 million, where do you think the bulk of that's going to come from? Do you think it's going to be corporate? Do you think it's going to be government? What do you think?
Well, we've certainly tried to get corporate, and we've not had much success, because the people who do give corporate are usually investors. So my training, as some of the people in the audience know, is I'm an engineer. I've worked on cardiovascular devices, I've worked on orthopedic devices, and with some success, we've been able to license the technologies to companies. With kidney, there's that level of corporate interest is not there yet, at least in terms of providing investment dollars. So then we've looked at the government, and we've gotten funding from one-off programs that have encouraged technology development. But often those one-off programs are, they're basically they're one-off, and then when there's a change in administration, a change in time frame, they're gone. So we've been fortunate. We've raised money from the National Institutes of Health to advance the technology. And then there's a partnership, as some of you in the audience know, called Kidney X, which is a partnership between the Department of Health and Human Services and the American Society of Nephrology. And they're trying to raise money both through private and government partnerships to catalyze technologies like ours. It's slow going, and God bless them, they're trying very hard. So we hope they'll be successful. But we don't want to wait for them to become successful. So we make the appeals and tell people, like, guys, if you can, through donations, through finding interested stakeholders, support us, because that's what's been our primary limitations. Now it's the limiting factor. And if people don't have the means to donate right now, we understand that. But again, as you mentioned, Jennifer, maybe people or they know do.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be you don't have to come up with a $10 million. I mean, just think about it. You come up with a few $1,000s, it all adds up. But what I would like to see is just this continuous machine so that we can continue the work. Otherwise, what happens, like I said, let's say somebody raises $10,000. I say, great, I've raised $10,000. Nobody else does anything. Then I'm kind of stopping. I have to stop again.
Right.
So That's really important for us, is to be able to have donors jump in. And I am hoping that the patient community and their friends and family can step up. And if not directly, tell folks at work, tell your employer, tell other groups, because that's what's needed.
Yeah, I've noticed that the social media audience for the Kidney Project is very engaged. And I notice on posts, we get lots of shares, which I think just helps to share the message. It helps to just generate awareness about this. So I think that's great. And that's super helpful for the organization as a whole. What other ways can people get involved? What else can they do?
Terrific. I think, I think one of these is just, you're sharing, you're telling people, volunteer. How can you volunteer? You can volunteer. You don't have to volunteer, come to UCSF, although you can, would love it. Go and volunteer and organize yourselves and advocate for more support. I mentioned Kidney X, the partnership between the American Society of Nephrology and Health and Human Services. They're trying to get money, matching funds from the government to support what the American Society of Nephrology is putting in. So you want to be able to tell your congressperson, this is important. This is something I care about. This is what I as a voter care about. They'll pay attention. So I think one of them is basically organizing groups around this issue. We work closely with the American Association of Kidney Patients, and one of the terms they have is a kidney voter. Make sure that whichever side, whichever party you're from, whatever your affiliation, that you care about this type of issue, because this is not a partisan issue. This is about patients' lives. And the fact is, with the technologies like ours and others, you can make an impact. So I would say definitely do that. Help spread the word, not only through social media. We can also work with your groups to advertise. If you have a story, please share your story. Liz will put links down here so that you can share your story, and more people know about it and what the artificial kidney might mean to you. It would get the word out. And maybe one of the employers, maybe one of the foundations will say, wow, this is really interesting. We never knew about it.
Exactly. So just to back up, a couple of things for the listeners here. One is there's a brand new link on our website. It is, Liz is going to put it up on this, on the YouTube live as well. So there's going to be two of them, actually. One of them is going to be share your story. And the reason that we want these stories is because we've got to humanize this project. And it's more than just the science behind it. It's now, we've kind of got the science figured out. It's now shifting, and it's about the people, the human lives, the human toll of kidney disease, what it's like to be on dialysis for 10 plus years, what it's like to get a transplant and have it rejected. There's such a human toll to the current industry, the current, kidney disease industry. It's very difficult. And I think unless you've been impacted or somebody that's impacted, you don't understand what all of that means. So I think helping us by sharing your story and helping us to humanize, sort of give kidney disease a face, I think that would help a great deal. And we would use those stories on potentially social media, on our website, perhaps when we're out pitching funders, to kind of, again, humanize us a little bit and putting a human face to it. So that would be a great help. You can go on our website right now. You just submit a photo, tell us a little bit about yourself. We'll follow up. A couple other things I wanted to throw out there. One of them is, fundraising on a very small level. So we have had some of our supporters do very small GoFundMe projects or small events that raise, $1,000 to $2,000. That's amazing. That they're utilizing their network, their people, to raise money to something that's important to them. And so I think that's another way. We're going to, hopefully we'll be able to kind of put some recommendations or some tools in place to help supporters if they're interested in going that route. And then the third thing is this volunteering. And so we've mentioned it a lot today, and I just wanted to kind of go into that a little bit more. You know, when I first, so I'm a volunteer. I have a background in marketing, as I said, and I am loaning my skills to help with things like social media and creating pitch books and stuff like that. We know you guys have skills too. And whether you're an attorney or a fundraiser or a lobbyist, or you know somebody who has those skills, you know, I think, you know, maybe you are a manager of a restaurant, you're really good at organizing people. That, you know, when we talk about lobbying, that's an area we could use help with. Something that Liz said to me at one point that really sort of resonated with me, she said, you know, the group who's working on this project is a group of scientists. And so they know how to put together and create an artificial kidney, which is exactly what we need them to do. But they're not skilled in fundraising and marketing and really sort of generating a buzz around this. And that's where I think us as the volunteers can step in and potentially help. So again, this is a new sort of program, and we're testing the waters to see if there's an interest. But if you do have an interest in volunteering and getting involved, again, there's going to be, there's a link right now on the website. You can just fill out a form and just talk a little bit about what you're interested in or what your skills are. We will then take that information, kind of go back and figure out, you know, where we could really tap into this volunteer group. But again, as I mentioned before, you know, right now there's a very small staff of scientists. If we can start expanding that net a little bit, you know, around the world with people who have different skills and can pitch in and help, I think we're going to be able to move this along a little faster than without, you know, it's power in people. And without this group of people, it's just going to be a little bit slower. So I want to get people excited about volunteering and getting involved. You know, imagine when you start hearing that this thing is in human trials. I just said this to my husband today, and you can say, I played a small piece in that. I was involved in that. Like, how exciting it's all going to be for all of us. So if you're interested in volunteering, take a look at that link, fill it out, think about what you might be interested in doing, and we'll circle back with you.
Hey, Jennifer, I have a question for you. I mean, I think I'm just putting myself in the shoes of you know, some of the patients and their family members listening. You know, when you talk about volunteering, usually like there's this activation energy of like, I got to do this. I think it's important. I know I should do it, but I'm never sure how to get started. Can you, you know, talk about what strategies work and what the impetus, you know, helps to get people going? Because I can just imagine some people like, yes, I completely agree, I want to do this, but they're not sure exactly how to get started. Then they feel, at least I can think, is it too little? And then I'm thinking like, oh, if I want to do something meaningful, it's too much. Maybe with your marketing background, you can guide us on some of the steps people might take.
Yeah. So I can give you an example. When the Super Bowl was in Minnesota 2018, I think. And so I worked for the host committee, and that was a nonprofit, a 501c3. We were responsible for raising the money and then putting on the big festival that surrounds the Super Bowl. And so we were we had a small staff. We were very volunteer driven. And we had a lot of people that wanted to help. And so what we did was we formed sort of committees. So we had, we had a marketing committee, we had a fundraising committee, we had a volunteer committee, and the volunteer committee rallied the volunteers and sort of organized them. So again, it depends a little bit on where the interest is, but I think the ultimate goal, and I know a lot of nonprofits also work in this way, where they've got people that are interested in helping, they'll establish different committees. And I think if we can generate enough interest, I think perhaps we could get to the point where, you know, we have a volunteer lead, they're running, like, let's just say it's me, I'm running the marketing committee. Then I sort of, you know, have someone working on PR, and I have somebody working on copywriting and somebody working on social. So it's almost like a little department, you know, within that. And if somebody can volunteer for, you know, 4 hours a month or 24 hours a month, you know, I think we can accept any bit of a commitment. And I don't think we need somebody to jump in and work 40 hours or anything like that. I think, you know, let's start small, let's see where the needs are, and let's see where the talent is, and then we can sort of regroup. And some people are going to have more time than others, and that is just fine.
You know, it's interesting. One of our patient advisory council, we have a group of patient advisors who guide us. Again, took the initiative, say, hey, no, let me start doing a GoFundMe page. And this is sort of on his own. And this was happened earlier this month. And he said, you know, I'll just set a modest goal, 2,000. And he was not sure, I think, of how it would go out, but he ended up raising almost 5,000 in less than 2 weeks. Think about that.
Wow.
And again, it was like, I think I was certainly grateful, but I think I'll just say he was probably surprised with what the level of engagement he got. And I think when you as patients and you as family members of patients go out there, it carries a different weight than when I go and say, give us money. And again, to us, this is a team effort. And I think, when people who know you respond to you, I mean, they'll respond to me to some extent, but they'll really respond to you as the patient and the family member. So I think it's important to put yourself out there. And yes, I can just imagine myself if I was in shoes, I'd be maybe feeling a little apprehensive, but start small.
Yeah. Exactly. Start small. And not everybody is comfortable with fundraising. And so, let's look at other ways too that people can get involved. Maybe they don't want to be the ones making the calls, but maybe they'll help us put together packages and proposals and such. So I think, as a community, I think if we all kind of work together, I think we can do it. We can get this thing launched. So let's talk about a couple other things here. So let's see, besides funding, what is the largest impediment to the project right now? So are there any other challenges that we're facing besides just the fundraising?
Yeah, I think I was alluding to that by saying, finding the commercial partners. So let me explain that a little bit. So there are companies and foundries out there that can make the membranes at a large enough scale with high reliability. But they're expecting certain volumes. So I think they're expecting much larger volumes than would normally than a small entity like us can provide. But it's a strategic relationship. So finding partners that will say, okay, we want to take you on, or are willing to take this as one of their, either as a mission or as a future business, that's important. So finding commercial partners that can make the semiconductor membranes, finding the partners that can manufacture the cells, and there's a lot of work that goes into it. And it's not just people who can make it. If you do them with a certain level of reliability and economy of scale, then putting them together into a device. Not my graduate students or technicians in the lab putting it together, but people who think about product development.
Right.
And reliability. We want partners in that space. The other place we want partners after that is people who are going to help us do the testing in the animal facilities and with humans. There's expertise around clinical studies, preclinical studies. We want partners who can say, okay, we can help you on that. Yes, we're doing some of that. But I think if there are ways for people and groups to be involved, those are impediments because we don't have enough commercial partners, partly because we are trailblazing. Semiconductor silicon is not used for implanted medical devices. And most implant medical devices don't use semiconductors, they use polymers. They may even use titanium, but they don't use semiconductor silicon. So it's almost trying to create a platform of technology components that does not exist. So it is an impediment. It can be overcome, but it will need people to come and say, okay, let's figure this out. And I think with enough both advocacy and both commercial interest, it will get there. So that would be what I'd say is an impediment is finding those partners, but we'll get them. And again, through this effort, maybe through our volunteer effort, we can find them.
So on that note, if somebody who's listening, they know of a company or their brother-in-law works at, what I mean, where they might have a contact that might help with this effort, how would they go about sort of sending that your way?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, if there's somebody out here says, look, I know somebody that does machining. I'm just going to use machining, or somebody does medical product development, or does semiconductor fabrication, or works on biotechnology. I think, obviously talk to them, find out that there's at least open to this idea, and explain to them why this is important. Because if it's, them personally, that's more important. Like, hey, this is why this is important. They've told me from the kidney project that this is what they're lacking. Here's why it's important to me. And why you might want to get involved because you're my friend, you're my family member, you're somebody I care about, etc.
Right.
Once that interest is there, I think they reach out to Liz. Liz can put her email out there, and through the Kidney Project website, reach out and put us in touch. We'll be happy to have a conversation. Now, in some cases, it will not go anywhere, but that's okay. Other cases, we'll find out. Well, maybe it'll go somewhere, but it's maybe not that particular group, and that's okay too. Other times it'll be just a perfect match and we can move forward. So I think, put them in touch. Liz is going to put out her email on the webpage. You have to reach her, and then we can have the conversation. And then we can, again, put together a more technical document on a RFQ, like what we need for quotation or what we need in terms of technical specs, and have the more detailed conversation around that.
Okay, that's great. And what about kids now? Will kids be, number one, invited to participate in the trial? And number two, I mean, are you guys planning on this being implantable for kids as well as adults?
It's a great question. So we know, obviously, kids experience kidney failure and they have to get dialysis or kidney transplants. Now, being a new technology, we have to be especially careful that we do not put vulnerable populations at risk. Kids are vulnerable population. So would want to definitely make sure that the technology is safe and will work through this series of preclinical studies and before we bring it to kids. Now, whether we bring it to kids first or afterwards, I can just talk historically, is that usually you don't start doing something on kids unless there's no other choice. So what I expect might happen is that we'd actually develop this with our preclinical work in animals, take it to first in human, not necessarily kids, get some data, and then adapt it to kids that need it. But there's no reason the technology should not work on kids, and would want to have children have the opportunity to participate in trials when it makes sense and when you've established some baseline level of assurance.
Sure. That makes sense. I mean, you think of it like the COVID vaccine. It started with adults, then it was older kids, then, they're still working their way through that. So I think that makes a lot of sense. What about people outside of the United States? What's the plan for, reaching? And I'm talking trials and then beyond trials.
Sure. I mean, so it's actually interesting you bring that up. And, end-stage kidney disease is not confined to the United States. We're into the developed world. It is a growing problem in many parts of the world. Fortunately, in the developed world, the rate of progression has slowed down, but the absolute numbers keep on going up because of diabetes and hypertension, in addition to the congenital factors. In other parts of the world, it's exploding. So then estimates that around the world, there are 2 million, 3 million patients on dialysis. There are very many patients that don't even get to that point because they don't have access to getting diagnosed or getting access to any treatment. They just die.
Right.
So then numbers like 5 million plus patients could benefit from this. So the question, I think, is, will this be available outside? Our hope and desire is that it should be available all across the world. And when my colleague, Dr. William Fizel, and I go give talks in the clinical conferences, we certainly talk to people from other countries, and there's now a growing interest to create a coalition around an international kidney consortium, because it's not just about the US, but across the world. And maybe that's a way to bring more awareness and more resources. But when we get to clinical trials, would probably start first in the United States, at places where we have the most familiarity with the technology, San Francisco most likely, and Vanderbilt. Move it to the other groups around here that are familiar with the technology. But again, as we recruit clinical partners from other parts of the world, would want to give it to them so they can test it out, get the data, but also make it easy to be introduced into those countries once we have a product.
Sure.
The vision here is, you look back, decades ago, whether it's pacemakers or stents, they started off in one country, but now they're available everywhere and saving lives and allowing people to live a normal lifestyle that was not possible 3 decades ago.
Yeah, it's amazing. One of the stats I read on your website, there's been no progress in the world of kidney disease, nothing major since dialysis. And that was in the 60s, right?
It's amazing you say that. And it also blows my mind. Like I said, I come from an engineering background and I work in cardiovascular devices. I use this analogy in some of my talks, especially with students who are coming from engineering. I show them a pacemaker or device to treat heart arrhythmia
Right.
in the 1960s. It was about the size of a refrigerator.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And it was external. The it was connected to the patient, but it treated the patient's arrhythmia.
Right.
And about the same time in the 60s, there's also the dialysis came about, and the machine was the size of a refrigerator. But today, the device to treat arrhythmia is an implantable defibrillator.
Wow.
That's like this size, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the dialysis machine is still about the same size. And maybe it has gone down to the a desktop refrigerator, but
Right.
that's it.
Right. That's
And
amazing.
whereas arrhythmia is now an implanted, you can travel. Many people people around you don't even know that you have it.
Oh, yeah.
And the experience of dialysis today is not that different from 30, 40 years ago. The outcomes not that different from 30, 40 years ago.
Right.
And it's still expensive.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's unbelievable that in this day and age, I sometimes will say that I'm working with you guys and people will say to me, you mean there's not an artificial kidney? Again, like there's almost an assumption that you think, how could there not be in this day and age? So, we need to get there. And that's, that's what this project is all about.
Yeah. Jennifer, first of all, again, let me first of all, thank you for stepping up. And you've obviously, given your time to us, and we really appreciate it. And as you have explained different ways of getting involved, I'll hope that others will come on board as well. And for me, yes, we're engineers, we're scientists, we're clinicians. We need to, but we recognize it's a team effort. It takes a village, as some people say. But the thing is, it's not a lack of technology that's holding this back.
Right.
It's a lack of organizing the resources around this to make it to go to clinical trial.
Exactly. So let's all work together and make this happen. So I think we're going to pass it back to Liz now. Hi.
Great. Hi. Thank you both. This has been a great conversation. And we've had some great questions in the chat. I've been trying to answer some just in the chat via text, but a few for Shuvo. Shuvo, maybe really quickly, you could speak to the question of, will patients that have neurogenic bladder be eligible for the artificial kidney, as well as if you've already had a kidney transplant, could you be eligible for this?
Sure. So let's talk about kidney transplant. And the idea is that, if you have a kidney transplant, you've had a failed transplant, would you be a candidate if you did not get another kidney transplant? The short answer is yes, in principle, of course. Now, every patient is different. It will be the answer will be customized for that patient and the physician and the surgeon. But in principle, if you had a transplant and the transplant failed for whatever reason, and you wanted to get the artificial kidney, that in itself should not prevent you from getting one. Same way, if you got the kidney, if you did not get a kidney transplant but in dialysis, if you got the artificial kidney, you'd still not compromise your chance for a kidney transplant. Again, I'm talking at a general level. Just by getting the device does not prevent you from getting a future kidney transplant, or if you had a kidney transplant, does not prevent you necessarily from getting the device. In terms of neurogenic bladders, I think the answer is, I don't know the answer off the top of my head. I think it's something we'll have to investigate closer, because with neurogenic bladders, look at the nervous system and it may or may not work. So it depends, I think, the exact condition and the exact origins of what's causing that. But we are hoping that in its one case, you void normally. And I said normally, meaning like you go to the bathroom. But if the signals are not accurate, that may be a problem. So it's hard for me to say the answer is yes, but I don't want to say no, because we also have all the technologies in neural, stimulation, how you control the spinal cord, how you control the brain. So I'm hopeful as a technological optimist, that technology will, align with what we're doing, so we can integrate both of them and provide normal bladder function.
That would be great. Thank you. And then there was one question about creatinine levels and the device's effect on that. So the person said that their creatinine is around 15. And how would getting the artificial kidney change that?
Yeah, so I think we should think in terms of creatinine today is usually monitored in terms of GFR, and you want to both look at urea and creatinine. So you are able to provide a level of clearance that will bring your creatinine levels to something that is what I'll call it more normal as a function of the filtration. So by providing the equivalent of 30 to percent kidney function, you may have some levels of elevations, but fundamentally you'll be, because you're operating continuously, and you're also removing the middle molecules such as beta-2 microglobulin through the filter, you'll have better toxin clearance than you normally do with standard dialysis as it is practiced in center. I think I'm not really sure if I'm answering the question, the questioner's inquiry, but I'm happy to follow up specifically about creatinine if they want to follow up via email.
Okay, great. And one final question, do we have any estimates about how much the device will cost eventually?
That's a great question. I think, the question about cost and price is really a business decision. I can give you a sense for what it'll cost to make, and it'll, I can only project that based on what we know from other medical technologies, whether it's like pacemakers, stents, artificial hearts, orthopedic implants. What it costs to make and what they sell for are very different. What it goes to for sale is basically determined by insurance and market forces. In terms of cost of goods, it's certainly going to be relatively low cost, taking the advantage of the fact that silicon membranes, when you produce in scale, become very low unit cost. That's why your phones, your TVs, your computers are so cheap. So we'll be able to make lots of membranes at scale, and the unit cost is going to be lower. Same thing with cell production. You improve the cell production, you take economies of scale, you're going to be cheaper. That may not be a satisfactory answer, but let me put it in other ways. What I hope is that the device is going to be sold at a price such that it's going to cost Medicare less than it does now. And if I can just project, it should allow Medicare to spend less on treating or maintaining the patients with an artificial kidney than it does for dialysis, and hopefully at the level of a transplant patient.
Great. Thank you. Well, I think we're just a couple of minutes over, so we'll wrap it up there. But we really thank everyone for tuning in today. We're sorry if we didn't get to your specific question, but we will try to get to it next time. And in the meantime, get in touch with us, fill out our forms, and we look forward to working with you and making this a reality with your help. So thanks a lot.
Bye.